Imagine this. It is the morning of June 28th, 1914, in Sarajevo. The streets are crowded, the roads are decorated with flags and poles all around. An open top car moves slowly through the city. Inside the car sits the heir to the Austro Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. In our real history, a gunshot echoes through the street. Within weeks, the world is at war. But today, we're changing one detail. What if there was no assassination? What if there was no immediate crisis? So, would World War One still have happened? Today, we'll be looking at the two main paradigms of international relations theory: realism, which most scholars believe in, and constructivism. Before we explore the what if, we need to understand the world before 1914. It was deeply fragile. First, militarism. Second, alliances. Third, imperial rivalry. And fourth, nationalism. The Austro-Hungarian Empire ruled over many ethnic groups: Serbs, Croats, Czechs, and others, many of whom wanted independence. Serbia, just across the border, encouraged these nationalist movements. By 1914, Europe was not peaceful. It was tense, it was armed, it was waiting for something to emerge. So let's briefly return to what actually happened. 1914, Franz Ferdinand gets assassinated by a Serbian nationalist. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Germany offered unconditional support. Russia mobilized to defend Serbia. France backed Russia. Germany declared war. Britain joined after Belgium was invaded. Within 1 month, Europe was engulfed in war. But again, we are removing that assassination. So, what changes and what does not? Let's begin with realism, perhaps the most influential theory and the most influential paradigm at the systemic level of analysis within international relations. It starts with a few simple assumptions. The first is that the nation state is the principal actor. Other bodies exist, such as individuals and organizations, but their power is limited. Second, the state is a unitary actor, which means that national interests act with one voice. The state is essentially a person with one voice. Third, decision makers are rational actors in the sense that rational decision making leads to that pursuit of national interest. It also suggests no matter all leaders, they attempt to survive in a competitive environment. Finally, state and most importantly, states live in a context of anarchy. That is, there's nobody in charge internationally. So this often used analogy for this is what Mearsheimer calls the 911 problem. The anarchic system now means that you cannot rely on anybody for help, which means states must rely on self-help. So survival becomes the primary goal, and states are forced to constantly worry about relative power rather than morality or intentions, which ultimately leads to the idea that capabilities dictate intentions. If a state can do something, it is going to do it, and this increased militarization that Europe had seen ultimately created a security dilemma. All theories are actually imperfect. If one was accurate at accounting for the patterns that have seen in international relations, there would be no need for any others. All paradigms are therefore falsifiable, and therefore the sheer volume of different theories means that international relations is still a growing discipline that is undergoing significant development. So these theories need to be applied correctly to an event. And another theory that could be used to explain this is constructivism. Best explained by Alexander Wendt, it is anarchy is what states make of it. Therefore, anarchy is actually caused by our past interactions. It is what states make of it. How we acted in the past dictates how we are today. Therefore, the European experience was because the Europe had cultural differences, different powers, different. Ultimately, the assumption that all states are anarchic, according to constructivism, comes from not knowing what your enemies will do. States make of it. History informs those interactions. History creates ideas of other states. History is about creating those identities, those norms, those cultural factors. Anarchy, according to constructivism, is treated the way it is because of our past experiences. It is socially constructed. And we have forced anarchy to look this way. It has not been just forced upon us. And thus, it is about, and thus, realists and constructivists really contrast when it comes to looking at the material side of things versus the ideational side of things. Realists focus more on weapons, how many weapons someone has, what would be the impact of those weapons, without considering identities, without considering norms, without considering the cultural differences that are there, without considering the past history between them. However, constructivists would ask, who holds those weapons, and what ideas do we hold of those states that hold those weapons? Therefore, we can talk about the balance of threat. So, socialization is a really important process in constructivism. It informs those ideas. It informs those relations that are there. It informs interests. Constructivism says that we are social creatures. This is a criticism of the state of nature. We are not just going to kill each other, but we still have attitudes that are going to change, and knowledge grows, thoughts change, and it ultimately broadens the minds of states. So, for example, France saw Germany as a historical enemy after the Franco Prussian War. Germany feared encirclement by France and Russia. Austro-Hungary Austria-Hungary saw Serbian nationalism as an existential threat. These shared beliefs, these shared narratives made cooperation much more harder and conflict more likely. Loyalty was also seen as morally necessary, while abandoning allies damaged that status, damaged that identity that a great power had in multipolar Europe. Those were the normative expectations. National identity is also emphasized by constructivism. Serbian nationalism framed Austria Hungary as an oppressive enemy. German identity emphasized strength and great power status. Because of these norms, leaders believed that war was legitimate, it was unavoidable. It wasn't something to just avoid, but rather it was honorable. While military strength has showed that national greatness, and backing down meant humiliation. It was about shared identities, it was about norms, it was about beliefs.